Great. It looks like we have quorum now, so I'll get started. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Tanya Koshi. I'm a Deputy Attorney General in the Civil Rights Enforcement section. I wanted to thank you all for joining us for this meeting. We're going to hopefully make it a very quick meeting to go over proposed amendments to the regulations implementing the RIPA statute. So since we have very limited time, I'm going to provide a presentation on the regulations before we go into discussion. But I believe you wanted to start with some introductions of all the subcommittee members. Excuse me while I pull up the agenda.
Tanya, as you're doing that, can we go ahead as board members? Okay, great. So I may not be able to see everyone's screens, but let me just say I'm Professor Lily Kajavi. I'm co-chair of the subcommittee, and I'm a professor of mathematics in Los Angeles and appointee of the Attorney General's office. And I'm going to ask those board members, subcommittee members who are present, if we could go around the room and introduce ourselves. And I'm not sure I can see everyone, so I'm going to invite a board member to go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. This is Abdul Pridgen, and I am Chief of Police here in San Leandro, California, and past president of the California Police Chiefs Association, and I am on the board representing the California Police Chiefs Association. Thank you, and I'll pass it to the next board member.
Hi, my name is LaWanda Hawkins, and I'm a board member, was assigned by former Governor Jerry Brown, and I'm here in Southern California.
Thank you so much. Are there any other board members who are here? I thank you, Board Member Pridgen and Hawkins. And it may be that it's three of us here. There is a board member, Taylor. Is board member Taylor here? And if not, that's okay. And perhaps board member Randolph. Tanya, go ahead.
Yeah, board member Taylor is here. I think she's calling in, I believe. She put in the text, the chat that she's calling in. But I'm hearing some feedback on my end.
Yeah, because I think I'm on the phone now.
Great, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Sorry, let me see if I mute my microphone or mute my audio. It might be better. Yeah, I apologize. My computer is doing some weird things, and so it won't let me out of my VPN. So if I turn my camera on, you're just going to see my office without me there, and the microphone. Yeah. So yes, board member Taylor here. I represent the California Public Defenders Association. I am a deputy public defender in San Francisco County and City. It's nice to see you all again in the new year.
Thank you so much, Board Member Taylor, and we can hear you loud and clear. Tanya, are there any other board members here that you're aware of?
That's it. It's the four of you.
Perfect. Okay. I don't know if in matter of, I know we have a shorter meeting today, but as a matter of procedure, if we should first do approval of the minutes. So can I ask any board members, I don't know if anyone wants to take a minute or two to reflect on the minutes, or if there is a motion to approve the minutes. I'll sit tight for a moment.
I move to approve.
I second.
Okay, shall we take a vote to approve the minutes? All in favor? We're a small group. Maybe we could do this verbally.
Aye.
Aye. Insert, because we have a public comment from last meeting. Do we review the public comment that was made, that was attached?
I don't know if those are generally included in the minutes or just become part of public comment. Can someone from DOJ weigh in?
Hi, everyone. This is Allison. The public comments are for the board members to review, and so they'll become part of the meeting, but they don't usually get attached to the minutes. If they are made during the course of the meeting, then they're usually reflected in the meeting minutes. But if they're sent to us, then we send them to the board for your consideration. But they don't get attached to the minutes.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification. Thank you, Board Member Hawkins, for raising that. So I think there was a motion to approve the minutes, and I heard 2 ayes so far. I'm going to also say aye, and Board Member Taylor, I'm not sure if you got to weigh in or not.
I said aye.
Aye, okay. So I think that's unanimous then. Is that correct? Okay. Great. So we've approved the minutes, and then I know we were going to then hear an overview about these proposed amendments to the regulations. So I think we're ready to move into that according to the agenda.
Great, thank you. So I'll just be very quick, and I think I might have already mentioned, I'm going to provide my presentation. I think the most efficient thing, given we have limited time, is that I can answer questions at the end of the presentation as part of your discussion. So just as some background, particularly for the public and newer board members, our office, the Attorney General's office, is directed under the RIPA statute to issue regulations implementing the RIPA statute's requirements. And the first set of regulations were issued in 2017. As many of you are aware, we had amendments to those regulations that were approved by the Office of Administrative Law last year in August. And after we submitted our proposals and they were approved by the Office of Administrative Law, the legislature passed Assembly Bill 2773, which was signed into law in September of last year by the governor. And Assembly Bill 2773 requires officers to provide the reason for the stop to any person that they stop. In addition to that, AB 2773 amends the RIPA statute to require officers to report to our office the reason given to the person stopped. So when we evaluated Assembly Bill 2773 and determined that we needed to go through another round of rulemaking. So I'm going to discuss this particular proposal as well as 2 other ones that we thought we would include in this round of rulemaking. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see if this works. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Someone could just let me know because I can't
Yes.
see you. Perfect, thank you. So as I mentioned, the first proposal that we are making is to add a new data element to account for AB 2773. And that new data element is reason given to the stopped person. And so this new data element is going to, based on the language that of AB 2773, it appears that the legislature intended for this data element to be different from the existing data element of reason for stop. So this may be obvious, but I think it's worth stating that the reason for stop data element, which is the existing data element, would be where the officer would provide the primary reason for their stop. And this new proposed data element, reason given to the stop person, would be the area or the way in which the officer would communicate the reason, communicate to the stop person. So in many scenarios, the reason given to the person who is stopped and the primary reason for the stop is going to be the same. But it's our reading of the legislature's bill that they appear to want to capture scenarios where the officer has a primary reason for the stop, but it communicates a different reason to the stopped person. So within this new data element, a reason given to the stopped person, there are several options or data values, as we call them, that an officer can select for the reason given to the stopped person. These data values are the same as the data values under the reason for stop data element with some exceptions. First, rather than having traffic violation or reasonable suspicion that a person engaged in criminal activity as 2 data values, and I'm just going to go back to the reason for stop data element, that's the existing one. So you can see that there's 2 different data values of traffic violation and reasonable suspicion. This one the new data element just breaks down all of the secondary data values under those two data values into primary data values. So what we have now is essentially 20 data values or options that an officer can select under this new data element of reason given to the stop person. But these data values are the exact same language of the data values under the reason for stop data element. There is one exception. There's a new data element. I'm hoping you can see me highlighting this, but there's a new data value, excuse me, of reason not communicated to the stopped person because the officer reasonably believed that withholding the reason for the stop was necessary to protect life or property from imminent threat. This language tracks the language of AB 2773, which provides an exception to this requirement that officers communicate the reason for the stop. So we wanted to include that here. We're also requiring or proposing a requirement that officers provide a narrative in the existing narrative field under reason for stop in two scenarios. One, when the primary reason for the stop is different from the reason for the stop communicated to the person, and in the scenario where the officer did not communicate to the stopped person, did not communicate a reason to the stopped person. So in both circumstances, we would want the officer to include some explanation in the narrative field for reason for stop. We're also providing an example of that to provide some guidance to officers. Additionally, we're including explanatory language in the reason for stop, the existing data element of reason for stop, again, providing some language to distinguish between those two data elements. So that's the first proposal. The second proposal is to the existing reason for stop data element. And like I said, we're taking this opportunity because we already have to go through rulemaking to make a few straightforward amendments as well. So as many of you may recall from the October subcommittee meeting, Kevin Walker from the Research Center brought up the issue of inconsistency in how officers designate traffic violation stops as either moving equipment or non-moving violations. I believe he gave the example of violations of Vehicle Code Section 5200, failure to display a license plate correctly. And we were seeing stop data entries that were characterizing that violation as either a moving stop equipment violation or a non-moving violation. And there was not a lot of consistency there. And he had provided definitions of these three violations to guide internal data analyses. And we are proposing just adding parentheticals defining those violations to provide guidance to officers. So that's what you're seeing here, and I'm just highlighting that right here. There's other proposals that I'll get into in a second. So that's the first proposal that or amendment we're seeking to do here. The other one we're seeking to do is in evaluating these stop data entries involving traffic violation stops, we observed something, which is that officers were characterizing stops as moving equipment or non-moving violations, whether or not the stop person is a driver. Under the existing regulations, officers are only required to characterize these stops as moving equipment or non-moving when the person stopped is the driver, and I'm highlighting that language here. But because in practice, officers are doing that regardless if the stop person is a driver or a pedestrian, like if they're stopped for illegally crossing a roadway, we wanted to align the regulations to existing practice. So we're proposing removing this language right here, striking when the person stopped is the driver. So in other words, anytime an officer selects traffic violation as a primary reason for stop, they will have to designate the primary type of violation. And like I said, this is what's happening in practice anyway. Another proposed amendment that we want to make is again, to provide guidance to officers when they're selecting the type of violation, is just to pick the one that's most closely applicable to the applicable offense. And this is to deal with the issue of non-moving and equipment violations overlapping, and to just, guide officers to pick the one that makes the most sense here, to kind of use their common sense. And hopefully the definitions here, which include examples, will provide further guidance. So our final proposal, I'll skip ahead to page 29, is here. So the 2022 amendments, or let me backtrack. The 2017 regulations stated that the department shall not release to the public unique identifying information or the officer's ID number. And that tracks the RIPA statute. In 2022, we proposed and was approved to amend this to state the department shall not release to the public personally identifying information or the officer's ID number. Personally identifying information is a larger category than unique identifying information. After, this proposal was approved by the Office of Administrative Law, we realized after the fact that we should return to the 2017 language just to be consistent with the RIPA statute. So we are just proposing reverting back to the 2017 language, like I said, because it's consistent with what's precisely in the statute. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, or we can move on to the discussion, or just move on to the discussion, and I can answer questions during that portion of this meeting. Oh, and actually, let me, excuse me, Board Member Pigeon, before I should just give you a quick overview of our timeline here. So like I said, our office is required, or may not have said, the Attorney General's office is required under the RIPA statute to consult with the RIPA board anytime they propose regulations. And so this stop data analysis subcommittee meeting is part of that consultation requirement. We're going to seek your feedback on these proposals during the discussion portion of this meeting, and we'll take in that feedback. And then our goal is to then publicly notice proposals to the public, which will trigger a 45-day comment period, during which time we will welcome the public's comments, have a public hearing. And as you may already know, we have scheduled a March 15th board meeting, during which time the full board will be able to formally comment, or vote and comment on the proposals. Once that 45-day comment period ends, we internally take in all of those formal public comments, including the board's formal comments, and we'll either amend our proposals or move forward with the rulemaking process. Our goal is to submit final proposed regulations to the Office of Administrative Law in late spring, early summer, with the goal of the Office of Administrative Law approving them by August of this year. That is in line with the timeline in our office and that agencies have to modify their systems to incorporate the 2022 amendments. And then the effective date would be January 1st, 2024, again, in line with the existing 2022 amendments, but also the effective date of the AB 2773 changes to the RIPA statute. So with that, I'll leave it to the subcommittee members to provide any feedback, and I'm also happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do you want to go ahead?
So, yes. So
sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. So if you could give me an example of information that would have been excluded under personally identifying information, the way it was written before, and what would now be available to the public under uniquely identifying information. You're on mute, sorry.
So this, why don't I share my screen? Hold on, get back. So Chief Pridgen, this proposal doesn't actually change the law or anything like that. The RIPA statute states specific, and why don't I see if I had it open a second ago. Can you see this?
Yes.
Let's see. Okay, I think it's right here. Yes, so here's the RIPA statute language. Notwithstanding any other law, the data reported shall be made available to the public, except for the badge number or other unique identifying information for the peace officer involved. So we're just proposing to return to that language. The proposal from 2022 was an oversight, and we're just trying to correct that oversight and return to the 2017 regulations, which, like I said, track the statute. So it doesn't really change what's available or not available to the public.
Good, thank you.
Board Member Taylor here. So I'm sorry, is it defined anywhere in the statute what uniquely identifying information is versus personal?
Yeah, yes, it is. The regulations define it, and let me see if I can find that. I think it's on page 4. So unique identifying information is page 4. And this is what it's defined as. Board Member Taylor, I think you're on the phone, right? If you have the document up
Yes.
on your screen, it's page 4. And it's number 23, or subdivision 23.
Okay, I see it.
Is there any other questions or feedback that you have on the proposals that we could
Tanya,
take in?
Let me ask a question that's, you mentioned that there would be a new field where a narrative entry was allowed. And my question is actually not about necessarily these categories, but do you know offhand, and different agencies might use different methods, but how these forms are usually filled out? For example, is there some kind of tablet and officers are normally indicating checkboxes of some sort? I'm trying to remember if any of the other fields of data in previous years have included a narrative entry, and just trying to think ahead a little bit about how that would be analyzed. So I guess the question is, how is the narrative information collected? Maybe it varies by agency.
Yeah, I'm going to punt that to someone else from our office. But
Yeah.
before, I just want to clarify one thing. We're not adding a new narrative field. There's an existing narrative field under the
Okay.
reason for stop data element, and officers are required to provide a narrative under that data element. And so we're just adding additional requirements within that narrative field, that existing one. So to the extent an officer provides or communicates a different reason than the primary reason, or they don't provide a reason, they need to explain why in the existing narrative field. But I'm just looking at who is in this meeting, and I'm wondering if Kevin Walker might be available to provide, or Aaron Choi, if they're available to provide some feedback on, or a response to how officers in practice use those fields, those narrative fields. I think neither of them are.
We
there's
may
Kevin.
not have a definitive answer offhand, but Kevin, I saw you unmute. You might have some recollection if those narratives are if there's rarely extra narrative detail, or if in fact that's used a bit.
Yeah, so I can't speak as well to the actual front end user interface and the medium through which officers are accessing kind of the stop data entry software, because I believe that varies quite a bit by agency and maybe by assignment type. But I mean, this is a existing required field, and so officers do enter in information in this field already. As Tanya was mentioning, this would be a requirement that in these cases where they provide a differing reason to the person that they stopped from what they indicate as the primary reason for the stop, that they also provide additional detail as to why they provided a different reason to that person within the existing field. So a lot of the the entries in here probably would be, the types of entries would be unchanged in cases where officers are providing the same reason that they stopped the person for to that person.
Thanks for adding that detail. Do any other board members have any questions, comments about proposed data collection here in this stage of
Board Member
the?
Taylor, I was wondering how, what is the process for analyzing, when an officer gives, a person stopped, the reason for the stop versus what they've communicated? Like, what is, how is that data collected and how is it analyzed? Because it seems like, an officer could say, well, I told them exactly what I told dispatch, and then how do you change that? Like, what does that process look like?
Kevin, I'm wondering if you might be able to answer that question. I mean, I'll start by saying, we haven't yet collected that data, so I think it's not yet clear how we would analyze it, but I feel like I'm talking without knowing what I'm saying when it comes to data analysis. So Kevin, maybe you're the best person to answer that
some
question.
of the audio for the question I missed out on, and so maybe if Board Member Taylor, if I could get the question again, I'm sorry.
Sure. I just basically asked the question is where you're saying that, you're collecting data on where an officer tells a person they've pulled over or stopped the reason for the stop, and then they inform dispatch of the reason for the stop. How are you analyzing that data to tell whether they're consistent or inconsistent? How do you collect that information?
Okay, my understanding here is that we're not collecting what an officer told dispatch. Rather, we have two fields. We have the existing reason for stop, primary reason for stop field, where the officer indicates, I believe it's item 14 in the regulations. I could be getting that wrong, sorry. But the primary reason for the stop, which was an existing field, not added by AB 2773, and that there's the new field of reason given to the person stopped at the time of stop field, which is the new field, which is where officers should be indicating what they told the person that they stopped about why they stopped them. So for both of those, that information's being relayed to the department or collected by the officer based on what the officer says those reasons are. So we don't have data on what they transmitted back to dispatch. That's not collected as part of this data collection effort. So I don't think that we are comparing against what an officer said to dispatch and what they said in this field. Now, it very well may be that oftentimes that they match, right? But we don't have information about what was relayed to dispatch collected under this.
Okay, so how do we verify that the officer is telling the truth? Like, how do we verify the officer said, well, I conveyed this to the person I stopped, and this is the actual reason for my stop? I mean, it behooves the cop to say, yeah, of course they were the same. I told him this is the reason why I did it. So how are we accounting for the fact that they might not be completely honest? Or just, I don't know, misremember, whatever is going to happen. Like, there has to be another source of, I feel like there has to be another source of confirmation that what they told the person versus what they claimed the reason for the stop.
Yeah, to my knowledge, I don't believe that there's an alternative source that would capture all of the stops that happen in the state of California that we could compare the data that now the legislature is requiring officers to collect under AB 2773 against. So like many of the other fields collected by officers within this data collection effort were getting what the officers recount as how the stops unfolded.
Can I just add to that? Yeah, I think Board Member Taylor, you raised an excellent point. Just as a general point of view, that we want to have data that has integrity, and even if there isn't some precise way to audit aspects of this data collection effort, there still are enough trends, there, systemic practices that are revealed by this data that I think still do really inform what the board recommendations can be. And then what you're raising is a larger question for us to always be mindful of. And will we have opportunities in some aspects of the board's work, including this data analysis, to somehow audit or sort of gauge the integrity of the data? But even if we can't do it in the way that you proposed right now, I think you're raising a point that we want to always be mindful of. I also see Board Member Hawkins, is that your hand up? And if so, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, I'm with Board Member Taylor. I'm a little concerned, but I also thought when we pulled them over that the officer had a camera on them, and that would have verified what he's stating to the person he's telling him. Kevin, can you just give us an example of what you're saying regarding it being two different statements that can come up? First, Kevin should give us an example first, I believe.
Right. Well, to speak to that point a little bit more, I mean, regarding video footage of interactions where officers are stopping individuals. I mean, not all agencies have body cameras, and also body camera footage is not collected as a part of the RIPA data collection effort. And so we do not have body camera footage for all stops that occur within the state. They're not aggregated. The Department of Justice, which helps the board with the report, does not have body camera footage for all of the stops. And then there would be the effort of comparing each stop record against body camera footage, and there are millions of stops they go on each year. And so while there are probably sampling methodologies that researchers could employ who have access to body camera footage to compare stop data entries from RIPA to what you're able to observe within body camera footage, that's not necessarily part of the data collection effort outlined in the regulations that we're discussing.
And hi, everyone. This is Allison.
Oh, I understand that, but could you give us an example about sorry, Board Member Taylor.
An example.
I was just going to ask if there was not an auditing system in place where you don't necessarily have to collect all millions of stops, but you can audit them. Meaning you can take a sample and compare and decide where the error rate was.
So this is Allison Elgart from DOJ. The board, the policy subcommittee has discussed this, and the board has actually recommended that LEAs law enforcement agencies conduct their own audits because they are the ones who have access to the body camera footage. So because that's not something that's submitted to DOJ. DOJ does not have the capacity, and we don't have the resources to do that type of audit. But we have encouraged both researchers and law enforcement agencies to conduct those types of audits within their own agencies. And some law enforcement agencies are doing that as part of their own check and part of their own accountability systems to make sure that what's being recorded as part of the RIPA data is a accurate reflection of what was recorded by body camera footage. But the body camera footage itself, while it does contain important information, it's not part of the RIPA regulations. And so anything concerning the body camera footage would be something that would be considered outside the RIPA regulations themselves.
I understand. This is Board Member LaWanda. But what I was talking about was Tanya or Kevin giving an example where a law enforcement officer might have said one thing when he pulled you over, and he's reporting something else. And I was trying to ask for an example on that, not to do with the
Yeah.
body cam.
Yeah, so an example might be, you know, and again, I'm really just thinking out loud here. An officer, we provide, I think, an example of this in the regulations themselves. An officer may stop a person and out of the safety of the people around them, may not communicate a reason for the stop to the person. But when they're entering in the stop data form, they might say that the reason for the stop was that the person matched the description of a suspect. So the reason for the stop might be different from what they would enter in the new data element of reason given to the person stopped. And what we're understanding that the legislature was intending to do here is that, you know, there are many times when an officer might stop a person and say, hey, I'm stopping you for a broken taillight. But the actual reason for the stop might actually be that they wanted to search the person or something like that. So there's this disconnect between the primary reason for the stop and the reason communicated to the person. So we're trying to capture what we're seeing as the intention of the legislature here, which is accounting for those scenarios when the reason communicated to the person is different than the primary reason for the stop. I hope that might have given you some guidance, but let me try to share my screen and provide the example that we included in the text. Hold on one moment. So Member Hawkins, we provided this example, and I think it was kind of precisely the example that I had just described, which was, you know, we have Officer A here. He stops a person who matched the description of a suspected child abductor, but didn't provide that stopped person a reason for the stop because, you know, of concerns of safety or wanting to make sure the person doesn't go away. And then, so when they're trying to enter in the stop for the in their stop data collection system, under the reason given to the stopped person or the person stopped, they would write reason not provided to the stopped person. But under the reason for stopped data element, they would select reasonable suspicion that the person was engaged in criminal activity. Does that answer your question? I'm happy to, okay.
Yes, it does.
So, Chair Kajabi, we're a few minutes over the time for discussion, but I just wanted to make sure that all the members have an opportunity to provide any final feedback. Like I said, you know, we will incorporate any feedback or observations you've made and consider them. And then we are hoping to publicly notice the final, well, not the final, but the rough proposals to the public fairly soon. And that'll trigger the 45-day comment period. And we look forward to seeing all of you at the March 15th board meeting when the entire board will be able to provide formal feedback and vote on a public comment that will be part of the rulemaking package that we will have to consider when deciding on the final version of the regulations, or the proposed regulations, excuse me.
Thank you. Is it possible for you to drop the screen share for a moment? Can I, just so I can see, are there any board members who heard? I appreciate the discussion points that were raised. I didn't hear any comments that would point to a change in what's proposed so far. But just that we got some clarification, at least on the potential new, you know, the new data collection fields and so on. One last sweep through, did any other board members have any questions or comments to relay back to DOJ? And we'll have some discussion of next steps at the end.
Board Member Taylor here.
Yes, please
I
go
just
ahead.
had a couple, yeah, I just had quite a few people be a little, I don't know, skeptical of the data collected because it's just relying upon, you know, not all of it. Some of it's been, you know, vetted out by independent sources. But some of the data just comes from officers themselves. And I've had a lot of skepticism, people coming to me talking with a lot of skepticism about the reliability or the credibility of the self-report. And this seems like a place or a point where that could also happen again. So while I don't have an answer to how you deal with that or how you minimize that, maybe we can start to be thinking about ways to do that.
Your point is well taken. I am reminded that in the last RIPA report, we refer to some other groups. For example, the LA Inspector General has done some audit, and I think they compared body camera footage to some stop descriptions. And so maybe that's something we want to think about for the next year's, this coming year's analysis. If not some sort of audit of the data itself, some deeper look at the agencies that are doing work like that, or in particular in other bodies like Inspector Generals, because you're making a profound point about the process. Tanya, I think we've all had an opportunity then to thank you so much for your presentation. We've all had an opportunity to ask questions and so on. Was there anything else that you wanted us to address in particular right now regarding the regulations from the board? And if not, can we move to public comment?
No, that was it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay, well, I think this is an important part, extremely valuable part of any of our meetings is to have an opportunity to hear from the public. And so we'd like to open up for public comment. In the past, we've asked folks if they're able to raise their hand if they're on a Teams window where they have access to something you can toggle. And I see a couple of attendees starting to do that. And so what I'd like to do is go in the order that I see a raised hand. And so we invite public comment. And then if someone's in a situation where they're not able to indicate that, perhaps they're calling in by phone in some other way, then we'll move to an opportunity, maybe by region of the state, for folks to also unmute and weigh in. So in the order that I see them, I see Michelle Wittig first. Would you like to go ahead? And I think you're unmuted. Did you go ahead and please share comments? We're interested to hear. So Michelle, if you can hear me, I can't hear you, but I'm just gonna pause for a moment, Michelle Wittig, to share public comment. So on my end, did anyone else hear? No? Okay, so Michelle, I don't know if you can hear us. You might have tried logging out and you'll come back. And in the meantime, we'll pass to the next person. I see Brian Jones. I see that your hand is up on Teams. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for your work. As an independent data analyst, it would be very useful to have information, an additional data element that indicated whether the person stopped was a driver or a passenger or a bicyclist or a pedestrian. I don't know if this is the appropriate, iteration of the regulations to put that in, but I would urge the council to consider it. Thanks.
Thank you. Brian, usually we take comment and don't respond to each comment individually, but I'll just make the side point that I think that's actually that's now a new data element. So it's already built into the proposal. And what was highlighted today were just some additional new proposals since then that wouldn't go into effect if these are adopted until January 2024. Thank you. And Michelle Wittig, are you able to unmute and weigh in again? So I'm still not hearing additional sound. And so, Michelle, if you were unmuted on your end and it's not working, I invite you, I don't know if it's possible to call in on a different line with the Teams link. And I say this to anyone else who's trying to weigh in, if you find a different way to connect. Can anyone else hear Michelle at this time? No. Okay, so that's not just on my end. So Michelle, I hope you can hear me. And Michelle may try to reconnect. And in the meantime, I'd like to know if there are any other folks who'd like to weigh in from the public. And in case there's anyone who had wanted to unmute and weigh in who's not able to indicate that on Teams, I'd like to start in Northern California. Is there anyone from Northern California who'd like to share public comments at this time? And if so, please just introduce yourself and go ahead. Okay, and now I'm going to move to Central California. We'll pause again for a moment. If there's anyone from Central California who'd like to unmute and go ahead and share public comment, then please introduce yourself and go ahead. Okay, now I'd like to open it up to anyone from Southern California. If there's anyone from Southern California who'd like to go ahead and unmute and weigh in, please go ahead. Michelle, would you like to try to speak up?
Oh, great. I did log off and log back in, so I think I can see myself and hopefully you can hear me. Yes, I just wanted to mention that the LA Times ran a report that the full board passed a recommendation concerning curtailing pretextual stops and perhaps even eliminating searches that are attendant upon them. And I understand that 2 bills have been introduced, SB 50 for the former and AB 93 for the latter. And so I'm wondering if when you meet with the full board, you could articulate an agenda item in which you communicate to the public what steps the board may be taking to advance those 2 bills, and also in what ways members of the public can be part of that process. My main question has to do with the content of SB 50. I sort of understand it to be a suggestion that pretextual stops be curtailed, that is to say, reduced in extent or quantity, but the wording of the bill itself is a lot less specific. So, you know, I'm aware of the fact that at the federal level, pretextual stops are acceptable, but my understanding is that California can make its own rule with respect to that. So some clarification for the public would be very helpful. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for your comment. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to take this opportunity during our public comment period to unmute and to weigh in from any part of the state? Okay, great. I think we've heard from those who wanted to weigh in. Thank you so much to both of you, Brian and Michelle, for sharing your comments. And so now in the time we have remaining, we can have some discussions of next steps. Those could be next steps for this subcommittee or more generally for the board. Did any of my fellow board members want to share any comments at this point? Concerns, comments, suggestions?
Board Member Taylor here,
Right.
and I don't know if there's a space for it in RIPA. I think there should be a space for it, but not in this committee, but in the no-knock warrant situation where we have like the Breonna Taylor things like that going on, and kind of an analysis of really just the cost versus what really gets, really what really happens. I mean, like literally lots of times these no-knock warrants happen and like, you get like, low-level drug dealers, and there's like, less than a couple $100 worth of drugs, but then people lose their lives. So, I've been on a couple of subcommittees as far as racial justice who have been addressing the no-knock warrant situation. I know other jurisdictions are doing that as well. And so that's something I'd like to see the greater, in a greater realm discuss if possible.
Thank you for sharing that. And I wonder if also indeed at the larger board meeting, as we're looking at next steps there. And I don't remember offhand which subcommittees you might be on, but to raise this point as well. Other board members with discussions of next steps? Okay, and can I pivot? Nancy, I just saw you pop in on your screen. Did you want to share some of this from DOJ? Thank you.
Hi, Lily. Thank you. Great meeting, everyone. Fantastic to see you all. Happy New Year to everyone. One of the things that we'll need to do at the next subcommittee meeting is to vote on a new co-chair. And so hopefully, this subcommittee will think about who wants to be the co-chair of this subcommittee. If anyone is interested, we will be, you saw the announcement, we will be hopefully having some additional folks on the subcommittee as well, but we will do that next time. And then the other thing that we wanted to address, PORAC had issued a report about the last year's report, January 2022's report, not January 2023's report. But Professor Raphael, before he stepped down from the board, had suggested that maybe this subcommittee would want to invite PORAC to come to a subcommittee meeting to explain its findings and discuss that with the board. And so I wanted to raise that as a possibility with you all and see if that was something that you wanted us to arrange and put on the agenda for a future subcommittee meeting. And Lawanda's shaking her head.
Nancy,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I missed a little bit of I missed the beginning of the last thing you said because my little doggies are barking.
Oh, sorry. Professor Raphael had suggested that perhaps it would be nice to have the subcommittee hear from PORAC about, to explain sort of its findings, as we've done with other, organizations that have issued reports in the past. And I was wondering if you would want DOJ to arrange that for the next subcommittee meeting, whenever that is. It could be like a 10 or 15-minute presentation. They had, I don't know if what you heard, board member Taylor, but PORAC had put out a report about the prior year's report. I think, following on Professor Raphael's suggestion, I think, we would like to hear potentially from PORAC, because also, member Randolph is a representative from PORAC as well. I don't know if he's on, I don't see him on the call.
I'm not sure that he's on this, or he actually may be on this subcommittee, but he's not here.
Yeah, he is on the subcommittee. He's a member of the subcommittee, but I don't see him. I thought he was going to be here today, but I don't see him now.
Well, maybe go ahead, please, Board Member Pridgen.
Sorry, Board Member Pridgen. I will be opening to hearing their perspective, and I'm not aware of the report, but they can share it with us, and maybe we can glean something from it. So I'm open to it.
Okay, and I saw member Hawkins nodding her as well. So, I think that's something that we can carve out, like I said, 10 to 15 minutes for that presentation. So we will work on that for whenever the next subcommittee meeting is. I know Allison is in the process of putting those subcommittee meetings together for before the next board meeting. Allison, because this subcommittee meeting was specifically to hear about the regulations. And Allison, do you want to speak to that about timing on that next subcommittee?
Sure. The next, so we are scheduling subcommittee meetings for post and civilian complaints and the policies and accountability subcommittees before the March 15th board meeting. So you'll all, I've seen some emails go out today, so you'll all be getting emails and doodle polls and calls from folks to try to schedule those meetings. Most of them will be in February, maybe running into the first week in March, so we can get them all done before the board meeting to prepare the outline for the board report. And then the next round for the stop data subcommittee, and then all of the subcommittees again following that board meeting will likely be in May, and maybe some late April, depending on the timing. And so we can schedule, when we schedule this next subcommittee meeting, we'll put the co-chair election on the agenda.
Just to swing back for one moment, so Poor Access Peace Officers organization, I had a chance to only briefly look at some aspects of their report, and I'll say that on the one hand, I feel like this is a forum that has to be very open and transparent and open to hearing from all different constituencies, but I found the approach to their report to be sort of very narrow. I didn't know that. I felt it was in the spirit of the overall process, what we're trying to achieve here as a state with all the different perspectives that are here. So I just wanted to voice that, some ambivalence about maybe in general giving platforms to just very narrow views. But that said, in this, in the spirit of this being a very collaborative process, in some sense, welcoming all comers.
I think that's it for from the DOJ side, Lily. So if I think that's it, and if you're ready to, if there's nothing else, you can adjourn the meeting.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. We did, you mentioned, so I'll just say to everyone, Nancy mentioned a moment ago that Steve Raphael, one of our board members, a longstanding board member, has finally resigned from his time at the RIBA board. I'll just say personally, that's real. I feel that is a real loss. I just have appreciated every board member's very productive commitment and just this collaborative process. So I look forward to our future meetings and a future co-chair. But we're going to really miss his contributions profoundly. Thank you everyone for gathering today. It's great to see this new iteration of the data collection elements moving forward. And I look forward to seeing you all at the board meeting in March. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank
See you later.
you.
Bye.